Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. Who's ready for some fun?
The Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
God, I love Seinfeld. I've been watching it a little bit as I've been down in California, and I think I'm ready to jump back into that pool head first and just watch every single one of it. Today, we're going to talk about placemaking. What the heck is placemaking anyway? Why do we need it? How does it work? And all of the details with someone who's clearly very, very, very qualified to talk all about it. So let's get things started. First of all, we have a guest commissioner. Yes, we do. Miss Lauren Driscoll, welcome back. How are you?
Hey guys, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty excited, a little nervous, but I'm happy.
So if you remember, Lauren was our guest on the second or third episode when we first got this crazy thing rolling. So now we're into season 2, guest commissioner. Lauren, you want to remind everyone kind of your roles and duties and where you're sitting today?
Yes, well, I'm filling in for Jessica Smith. It's a game we like to call the 7 Degrees of Jessica Smith. Who doesn't know Jessica Smith? That's how I happened to know Don and Chris many years ago. Jess is a charismatic personality. If you're in a room, she's in a room, and 12 other people, you will all be friends by the end.
It's the Kevin Bacon thing of planning. That's what it is.
Yes, she's Kevin Bacon of planning. No, so I am a community development director in Kansas, and I've been in the planning field for almost 20 years now. AICP certified planner, doing the local gov thing. So I've worked for cities, counties. I happen to have worked both with Chris and Don and Jessica in Alaska. I was actually Jessica's boss, and Chris and Don have been consultants for me. So.
And you were an elected official too at one point, right?
No, not a public elected official, but I do sit on the APA board of directors. And I am very involved in APA. I was a chapter president for the state of Alaska, and just really love the profession.
As we do as well. And we're going to nerd out and we're going to talk about some placemaking today and have some fun. First of all, real quick, as a quick reminder, theplanning commission podcast.com. Man, our website is looking great and it's about to be launched. By the time this airs, it'll be active and live. Whole bunch of work has gone into it, and you, the listener, viewer, you're going to be really thrilled. We have another pretty exciting announcement that I'm really dying to say, and I don't know that I can say it just yet, but we are about to be on the doorstep of a huge sponsor, and you all know this entity, and that's all I can say about that for right now. But in the next week or two, I think we'll get over the finish line. So man, thrilled to death. So can't wait. All right, let's get going. I got a question to ask the two of you before we get into our whiskey pairing. This is something I want you to think about in the short period. I'm going to give you all like 5 seconds to think about it. So there you go. I'm generous that way. But placemaking, it is an interesting topic. And from my standpoint, my motivation or my thoughts on it is that it's tapping into something that we need. It's tapping into emotion a bit. Clearly it has lots of different motives, but I think it really gets into the human experience in a lot of different ways. So my question to you is, what emotions do people need in 2023, right? Where are we as a culture, and how the heck does placemaking and planning deliver into the things that maybe we're straying away from, or things that have changed over the last decade, certainly with the pandemic, right? And that sort of thing. But where and how do we have a role in getting you whatever that is, joy, if that's what's missing, other things? I'm not going to lead you too much, but do you have thoughts on that?
And to me, it's about connection. I mean, so much of our world is virtual, and people are all over the place, and the pandemic only heightened that. But I mean, placemaking is a spot you connect. You either connect to the place, you connect to the people that are sharing that experience with you, and all of that. It's a whole team of emotions, right? But that one defining anchor is I feel connected, which so many of us crave.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, well
I think about, we've been working on the project in Boise on 8th Street, and it's one of these COVID streets that, they put the dining out on the sidewalk when COVID hit. There had been talk over the years about closing it down to motor vehicles. And because of the success of that, that's happening, right? And it comes back to, I think there's a connection. I think there's a feeling. I think, Chris, you've been reading a book about just like social isolation and those things that are there. We've been doing work for AARP where the isolation stuff for seniors especially comes up. And these placemaking efforts, whether it's large scale or small scale, give people a place to do that. And I think what I've loved about it is just seeing the different communities experimenting with different ideas and different things. And even though we can kind of get upset that maybe that's too slow or not the right way, the fact that that's happening, and I think we could all say at the beginning of our careers that was not happening, is a huge marker of progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are both on it. And for me, that book that Don mentioned is called The Lonely Century. And it's all about how are we changing as a culture, species. Even the technology component of our lives is so dominant. And I think obviously in many ways it's beneficial, right? I mean, I don't think people would argue with that. But in other ways, as I think it's just ironic as heck, we're more connected, but in my opinion, more distant than ever. Are just getting together with neighbors. I mean, we've had this discussion recently in my household. Think about this. I want you to ask yourself this question. Like if you had a friend 3 doors down and it was 6 o'clock in the evening on pick a day, is it okay to just go knock on their door and say hi? I mean, my God, that's where we are, right? People are kind of, no, whoa, no.
Whoa, you can't even call them. You've got to text them.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And you're absolutely right with that too. You can't call. No, who does that? No, you got to text them and give a heads up, schedule a week in advance. And I'm like, come on, really? That's so sad to me. The impromptu part of us is just disappearing. And from my cold dead hands, I'm getting rid of my phone. Like, let's get the flip phone back because we need some interaction here, man. So to me, placemaking solves a lot of that, or at least tries to, and especially when it's done well. And not everybody has access to a big, beautiful park or something like that. Sometimes we don't need it. Maybe it's an empty lot that's just been sitting there and we can do something else with and bring that same level of joy. So, all right, cool. I think that sets the stage. Don, whiskey pairing. I'm so curious what you're going to do on this one.
I don't know that I'm going to be incredibly witty or profound on it, perhaps, but I think it all fits together for this. Our guest today from Project for Public Spaces, I know, is an organization that we have for a long time appreciated their work and looked up to. And a lot of times I'll go searching for something or an idea, and I'll usually have it pop up there. Combining that with the announcement that we have coming on board about a sponsorship, and then just having Lauren today and her story and where she's been and her service to APA, I think we have all made our mark. And so with that, today is going
Maker's
to
Mark.
I knew it.
So
there it is.
I'm going to say that now. Pretty common. Everybody knows Maker's Mark. But when we talk about placemaking, if you have not been to the Maker's Mark distillery in Kentucky, it is one of the more bucolic settings you will ever have.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Word bucolic more in my everyday life.
That's not that way. Bucolic's not in your comp plan.
I'm changing. We're stopping right now. I need an amendment.
Wow. Memo to the
bucolic
planning world.
of life.
Yes. Yeah. You just usurped quality of life in every comp plan, and we're going to now bucolic. Holy cow. That's a great word. I really got to pay more attention to you.
Bucolic.
Wow. Somebody read a book last night. No doubt about that. All right. I like it. I like it. Is it cask strength or what are we thinking
That one's
there?
not classic. This is
Okay.
just the handle size that a friend of mine
That's a
found on
great one.
sale in Colorado for $29 for 1.75 liters.
So are you talking lighter, quicker, cheaper? Because
Sure. Yes. Yes.
that would be
Diet
appropriate.
Coke compatible. I mean,
And not the red wax that we were exchanging via text ideas about the other day of our own whiskey idea, which we won't get into.
Right. Yeah, that's not going to be airing anytime soon. So with that, we're going to move on to our guest. Our guest today, the co-executive director of Project for Public Spaces, Kelly Verel. Kelly, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Good, good. Well, let's just start with the basics. Tell us and our audience who you are, your background, and how the heck did you end up with PPS?
Sure. Well, I'm now co-executive director of Project for Public Spaces. We're a nonprofit planning and design firm based in New York City, and I actually live in Brooklyn. So I'm coming to you today from my apartment in Brooklyn. A very 2023 moment. I've been with the organization a little over 16 years now, so it's been a while. I started out in 2006 in our public markets program and spent most of my career with the organization actually within that program. And now I am, hoping to kind of take us into our next phase. We're just over 45 years old now as an organization, which in the world of nonprofits feels kind of old. It feels like
Hey, I just turned 45 this year. That's hard.
Yeah, no, I'm older than you. So it's just, it feels different when it's an organization and a person. I don't know. I still feel young, but the organization feels like it's getting into that like institutional level moment. Which is something for me in this leadership position to be actually thinking about, and definitely is something that we're thinking about. But I came to Project for Public Spaces actually through the market scene. So prior to that, was working for Green Market, which is a large network of farmers markets here in New York City. And I was doing publicity and media relations for the network for approximately 3 years. And prior to that, I was actually a farm apprentice. So I'm not a planner. And I kind of say that because I think people are a little surprised that there are folks at PPS that aren't architects or planners or, technical designers. And I'm not. And, I come from the market scene and communications background to some extent, not as much lately, but and just dove really deep into that world and then kind of learned so much just in the 16 years that I've been at Project for Public Spaces about other issues around planning, about transportation. I came with very little knowledge outside of my own particular field. And by now, obviously feel pretty confident about the work that we do in a variety of different public spaces. But my story is a little unusual because I think that a lot of folks kind of assume that I probably have like a master's in planning or something else and sort of followed a pretty traditional trajectory, but I really didn't. And I think to some extent that also actually speaks to the ethos of our organization, which has always been that this is really meant to be placemaking in this sense is really meant to be something that is accessible to everybody and that all people, no matter where they're coming from, should be able to engage in this process for their own communities. And, it doesn't take a kind of specialized degree or particular experience necessarily to do it well. And in fact, some of the folks that are new to it are going to probably bring a totally fresh perspective and better and newer and more innovative approach than others that might have been doing it for a really long time. So that's me in a real nutshell there.
That's so interesting though, Kelly. It's when you talk about like the age of the organization, I remember 20 years ago when I was coming out of school, hearing about the Project for Public Spaces, and then years later, actually meeting some folks in Alaska. Gary Toth did some work for us in our DOT, and trying to placemake in Alaska, and it was just kind of having those conversations. So I mean, it really says something to the impact of the organization that I mean, you're hitting all these different corners of the country, even those far hinterlands into the Arctic. Yeah, and just really that message, it's amazing. That's something I hope you guys are just so proud of.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think you can get, a little bit caught up in your own thing and not sort of, especially in the last couple of years, right? Because we haven't been getting together as much as we used to and as much as we like, and getting out there as much. And I mean, we haven't done as many on the ground projects, although that's picking up quite a bit now, but that means not fewer site visits. And so you sort of forget to some extent. And it's nice to hear that. So thank you for that.
So how do you guys define placemaking? And then tell us why people need it in 2023.
Sure. I'm going to sort of wiggle a little bit on the question, only in the sense that we don't have we don't have one definition within our office of what is placemaking, which seems kind of strange, but at the same time is actually not, because it is meant to be so driven by the individual or driven by the community. So we actually put this out, and I've been thinking it may be time to do it again, but maybe 15 or so years ago, we actually put it out to our audience. Back then it was pre-social media, so it would have been just our newsletter at the time. But to define it for themselves, and received something like 700 responses. So that was like 700 different definitions, which was amazing. And I think there's something really powerful about not picking one, but actually kind of talking about that there is so much to say and so much to do around this idea that you kind of can't almost define it in just a really traditional way. But what I tend to do when I talk about it is I like to turn people away from the results of the process and more to the actual process itself. And so, especially in the last several years where the term has become a lot more popular, it's more ubiquitous. You've got folks out there who I may argue are not really doing placemaking, but are sort of saying that they are, or selling themselves as, being capable of doing it. And
the lifestyle center mall and the fringe of placemaking.
Exactly. And it's kind of, it's sad because in some respects, I think it's gotten a little bit down to like colorful tables and chairs and umbrellas and like that sort of experience. And that might be, part of the end result of a really great placemaking process, but it's not, if you do that without anybody else weighing in on it or having a say, and you just, pick up a catalog and pick out some colorful chairs and tables and slap them down in an open space. From my perspective, that's not placemaking. You might end up with a better looking space. You might even end up with some better amenities for the folks using that space, but it's not at the heart placemaking. Because for us, what it's really about is the process that gets you to the end result. And I wouldn't even call it an end result, because I think it is an iterative process. It's constantly evolving, adapting. You're constantly evaluating if you're a space manager, a public space manager, and thinking about the programming and use and amenities of the space and what's needed there. But whatever that is that your initial result might be, it's placemaking is about like the process that got you there. So who was engaged? How were they engaged? How was the initial idea for this space changed because of the people that were involved in the process of planning it? I've been in so many projects where folks have just never been asked what they want to do with the public space before. They just assumed they were the kind of users of the space, but not allowed to be asked what they might prefer to do or want to do there, or what they might change if they could. And the process, very simply, of just starting with maybe an evaluation tool, or actually just getting them out there observing, or bringing them ideas to just weigh in on, it's transformative in how they feel about that space and how they feel about the community that space is in, and then the ownership they have, the kind of buy-in they have with whatever's happening in that space afterwards. So it's that transformation that I find really interesting, and especially if you have a pretty inclusive process and you have a lot of different community members engaging, you also have this added benefit of folks that maybe rarely interact with each other, kind of interacting, having an excuse to kind of work together, all for sort of a betterment of their community. So all of those things I think are really needed in 2023 post-pandemic, especially because, as you were talking about earlier, we are so disconnected in a lot of ways, despite all of the tools we've been told connect us.
So if some of our listeners wanted to put placemaking in that definitions part of their zoning code, I guess we kind of burst their bubble with that. There's 700 possibilities to choose from, right?
Yeah, I mean, the key piece of this, I think, is the community engagement piece, is the who is involved in creating this space or revitalizing this space or rethinking this space. It's that if you're not thinking about the who and the community and the process that it's going to take to get them included, then it's not, in my opinion, it's not placemaking. It's, you may end up with a great space, but it's not that people will use, but it's not the same thing.
So Kelly, go ahead, Lauren.
Well, I guess so. Like, when you talk about, sticking that stuff in your comp plan, placemaking, and we talk about this term that we've thrown around for a long time, where does that fit, Kelly, in today? Where does that fit in for cities? I mean, is it the city's role when you talk about who is doing that? And it's about the people make placemaking. Where are we going with this into 2023 and beyond? And does the city have a role? What should that be?
Mm-hmm. I for sure think the city does have a role. I mean, especially if it's a public property. I think in a lot of ways, they're really important partners. If nothing, if they're not leading a process, then they obviously they have a lot of sway. They have the ability to change policy if it's getting in the way of a successful public space. They have outreach that a lot of other places don't have the ability, the ability to reach as many people. But, we launched in 2021 a new effort called Community Placemaking Grants. And it's meant to be, we fundraise for it. We find partners to work with us. And then through that process, we put out applications twice a year so that local communities can work on a public space project with us. And they receive free technical assistance from us and then implementation funds so they can actually relatively quickly implement the project that we work on together. And that's who I think we're really excited about working with personally, are these, these smaller community groups that are, either they themselves own a space or they're kind of stewards of a public space in their neighborhood. And they have the energy and excitement and, the local knowledge to really make a big difference there. And oftentimes the cities are important partners to those groups, but it's often those groups themselves that are really kind of leading the way.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
So Kelly, I mean, 45 years, I didn't know that. That's, I mean, gosh, 2.5 generations or so, whatever that you want to, however you want to measure that. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's related to, sort of how and where it's worked with some specifics, of things that you guys can cite and say, whoa, it really turned around city X. And the message that I like from PPS is, number one, it doesn't always have to be so dang complicated, right? Like, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work. There was an example we had in a rural town here where street going from the heart of town, a couple blocks away, they were complaining, oh my gosh, the kids are going super fast. And looking at this road, just out, and I'm going, well, paint would start, right? Paint would help the equation here. Well, lo and behold, we kind of sketched some stuff out, and the public works director there, town of 100, happened to be the volunteer firefighter, chief, happened to be the head baseball coach. And so they and his crew went out a week later with his baseball chalk marker and striped the roads and made some new crosswalks. Now, were they MUTCD compliant? Meh. But in a town of 500 people, great, man, right? Like, and it's not exactly placemaking, of course, but it's similar in that, hey, let's get it done. It doesn't have to take 5 years and federal approval, to make this go. So on that line of thinking, I'm curious if you could share with our audience very specific places and ways that you can point to and say, this really does work, and here's.
Sure. Yeah, I've got two that come to mind actually that are quite different, I think. The first is a little bit older now. It's probably been between 10 and 15 years since this was implemented, but would be the Campus Martius project in Detroit, Michigan, which is kind of the heart. So Woodward Avenue is the major thoroughfare that runs, I believe it's north-south, but I could be very wrong on that, and I'm sure somebody will tell me after this. But and it kind of, before it hits the lake, the river, the water, there's this kind of major moment where it used to be honestly a traffic circle, a huge traffic circle that had a monument in the middle of it, and that had been the kind of heart of the downtown kind of district for Detroit. And there was a big effort to, an understanding that it was very unfriendly to pedestrians, and there needed to be kind of a big moment in Detroit at that time, right? And so the idea initially was to take away some of the lanes of traffic from cars and in a city in Detroit, and to put in a back, essentially like a park plaza space. And that is what Campus Martius, what we worked with the folks there to create, which was this like really well programmed, relatively flexibly designed, so lightly designed kind of space around, using the monument, but then creating like a lot of grassy area, and they could have a Christmas tree, an ice skating rink in the, in wintertime. They could then have, the grassy lawn for pop-up markets or for concerts and things in the summer. There was a bit of a moment for a restaurant that could happen, and all of that in taking just some of the lanes of traffic was transformative in terms of attracting businesses back to the downtown, right? And a lot of this was really driven by a vision from Dan Gilbert, who owned quite a bit of property down there, and had relocated Quicken Loans, one of his companies, to the downtown, and wanted them essentially to have a bit of a, something that they could see as a value and asset to being downtown, was having this park right across from their offices. But the flip side of it attracted not just his folks and made them happy, it attracted other businesses into that area. And now downtown Detroit, and it's not entirely because of this one thing, but it definitely contributed to making the space attractive and drawing in a lot of interesting uses, and showing people that it was safe to be in the city, and it was a fun place to be. And we came back after an initial line of work with them. We came back several years later when we were working through a program with through Southwest Airlines to put in a beach. And it was this crazy idea that some of my colleagues had, which was to just throw some sand, like a giant sandbox for kids and adults, and put great chairs around it, and like have programming and have music playing. And what ended up happening was you had this downtown space in Detroit, and all of a sudden there were all these kids popping up, and it was like, where are these kids coming from? People were driving in from the suburbs or coming from the outer rings of the city to use this beach, to partake in this space and like have a good time. And just completely changed the way people think about this this downtown area in a city that sadly has had a lot of challenges, right? And now it's a very there's still challenges, but it's like transformed that whole area and made people see that Detroit is a place you don't have to be in a suburban area office space with a lot of parking around it. You can draw people into the downtown, and maybe some of them will even live there. So that's one example of a space that we're really proud of and excited about the results of. And then completely different circumstances and size. I worked several years ago in a community called Salisbury, Massachusetts, which is a beachfront community just south of the New Hampshire border, so north of Boston. And it is kind of a small traditional New England town, but it has this beautiful beachfront with a lot of kind of summer use and retirement areas, and just fun, kind of almost like a honky tonk commercial district with like a lot of old school arcades and pizza and that kind of thing. And it just had seen better days, essentially. Like the rental communities and the people that live there, that was lovely. But the commercial district that led directly right to the beach was a bit, it had been a while since anybody put a fresh coat of paint on it and thought about it. And it was an island. It was a median, essentially, that you drove down past all of it, turned by the beach, and then came right back up. And it was only 2 lanes of traffic plus parking, but it was too much. It was kind of, the median was not getting very much use because people would have to cross the streets to get to it. There wasn't much happening on the median, and consequently people were using the space, but like using it in a very quick way, like popping in, doing something, leaving to go someplace else. And the town itself really wanted to bring people back to the commercial district. So we came in and did a whole placemaking process. We evaluated the space with community groups. We, brainstorm ideas for short and long term. And they had a vision that they wanted to invest quite a bit into improving the space. They wanted to bring a comfort station, kind of a welcome center in, but there was a lot of tension around that and feelings of mistrust, and people weren't really excited about restrooms and all of this. There were all these worries. So we said, well, let's just start with some simple things for a year or two and get people using the space again and seeing what they think of it. And that will, impact where you maybe place the welcome center and what you do with it. So first thing we did was we actually took away a lane. We were like, let's take away a lane of traffic. So we were going to paint a lane of traffic and pull these heavy duty planters out to kind of create the safety barrier and space there. So that was going to widen our median. And then we, really kind of with the community really kind of planned, like, what are all the uses there? And the business owners got excited. They actually rented a carousel. So part of the median was taken over by a carousel. Yeah, it was exciing there. That was
Seen streets in Utah where you could put a whole carnival down that strip in the middle.
Exactly. We had some great turf that we had installed so that there could be, lawn games and like chair, you could relax in an Adirondack chair and just enjoy the space with like lights hanging overhead. One of the famous things down there were these competing pizzerias that were literally next door to each other, and you were either a fan of one or the other, but no place, they were walk-ups, so there was no place to sit. And so we put in a lot more seating for folks to actually like enjoy the pizza in that space, because it's actually a lovely space. The beach is right there. But we also did these fabrications with local folks to build these like surfboards, like high, like standing height surfboard tables. So people could kind of even just stand for 10 minutes and eat their slice, but on a surfboard because of the beach area. And the great thing was, in the very beginning, the community's reaction was like, yeah, we want to improve it. And they're like, we'll tell you what's wrong with it. And then, well, all right, you guys are going to come back in like 6 months and you'll fix it, right? Like that was kind of the beginning of it. And we're like, well, not so much. We really want you guys to help with it.
Yeah.
And it took a while, but over time, they were so enthusiastic. They were coming up with their own ideas. They wanted to put more murals on all the garbage cans, which they did. They built everything. A lot of the guys were like retired contractors and construction workers, and they were like, oh, we could do that. They installed the turf themselves. They put the surfboard tables together themselves. They did most of the work they did. And, we were just excited to see it. And in the end, it was wildly successful. People were coming in the evenings just to spend the time there for several hours. That never happened before. And just this last summer, they did eventually put in a welcome center, which we helped out with a little bit. And it is a much more welcoming space. It's much more breezy and open and kind of, it serves the purposes it needs, but without feeling like it's in the way. And all in all, I think it's just really had such a transformative effect on how people envision this space, which previously it was kind of a forgotten or a convenience stop versus an actual destination, which is what it turned into. And, honestly, relatively little time and with not an enormous amount of money considering the end result. So I hope that sheds a little bit of a light into like how you can really change downtowns and small towns using using placemaking.
So Kelly, I have a question. So I work for a small town. That's kind of my jam. I love working with small towns. And I'm sure some of our listeners are out there thinking the same thing. I mean, your story pulls on all my planner heartstrings. Like I just love all of it. But there's the technical side of things that when I hear about closing lanes of traffic, I'm like, oh my God, where are we gonna put all those cars? And I'm thinking about parking, and I'm wondering who's been pulling the permits for this stuff and how you got through risk management and all of those things that are kind of the unsexy side of planning and governmental administration and working with these types of partners. We just did a downtown arts and entertainment district here in my community. It's a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of stakeholders. I also think like small town, particularly downtown stakeholders, those people are invested to a level that is beyond your suburban soccer mom, beyond your regional politician, because that building, that business, it's their life, not just livelihood, life. And there's a whole lot of emotion and history and all kinds of stuff in there. So I guess like in that placemaking role that PPS has, like what do you guys do to kind of break through the technical, political side of all of that, in addition to all the cool stuff, beyond colored chairs, but still need to pull a permit?
Yeah, 100%. Well, we were lucky in that space because the town was basically on board with everything and like, we'll get it done. And we had a wonderful planning director who was essentially like, I will do whatever it takes like for this vision to happen. But we had our days when we were out there with, Chris, your story of the town, like the fire, getting out there with the chalk, same thing. We were out there in the middle of winter with the beach, behind us. We brought the biggest fire truck in the town down to make the turn so we could chalk out like how much space we could take while also letting that truck make its way around the turn. So we did those things that were kind of more behind the scenes, and I have great photos of me like standing there pointing at the fire truck. But so we did all of that because that's obviously it's important. We had some folks in transportation on the team that I had pulled in, and I was like, is this going to work? Behind the scenes, just like tell me if we're crazy. And then, the business owners, you're right, were deeply engaged. They were engaged in the programming already. In a lot of ways, that space they really kind of felt like it was theirs because they had been kind of trying to program it for years by themselves. So they had to be involved in all of the planning, all of the meetings. I distinctly remember spending time in one of the like kind of tchotchke beach towel kind of sunscreen stores, just sitting there, like letting the owner cry because I was talking about taking a parking space away. One, but there's plenty of parking, by the way, but
no, there's not. Just ask her.
And just like taking, just like letting them do it, like sitting there and like listening. And we were listening. It wasn't, but just like that stuff is important because people sometimes just need to tell you that these are their concerns and that you're actually like listening. And we did, we built a lot of evaluation in that first summer. So we, everything we did was a pilot. Everything could get taken away. And we experimented with a parklet that was taking one parking space away. And it was, eventually it didn't last. But that was the whole idea, was we were like, this can go, this isn't permanent, and we did a lot of parking evaluation. Like actually a lot of folks, we got a bunch of teenagers for the summer out there counting spaces, counting how long people were in them, well, what was really the use of the vehicles in that space and what people were, when they were parking, where they were going, how long were they staying, why there, why not there? There was a huge parking lot that was always underused, that was a block away, like what, so that we could also kind of make the case at the end. So I think between the success of just the space, the business owners seeing the success and seeing the increase in their sales, and then like data to kind of back it up, and pulling in the local police department the entire time. We were talking to the chief of police about like, policy, parking policy potential changes. By the time we finished that first round in the fall, after it was like fall into winter after the first summer, the police were coming up with ideas for changing parking to to benefit the public space.
And that's the success you want, right? When they're coming up with it, because you've gone from something that's probably very foreign to that piece. The cynic in me always says, when we talk about pilot projects, can we pilot this highway widening thing to see if it actually works in reducing congestion? I mean, so you're a community out there, you want to get started in this for whatever crazy reason you haven't heard of Project for Public Spaces in the 45 years. What's your advice? Where do you start? Materials, conversations, what would you tell them?
I mean, the start is the space itself. It's not, what do we want it to be yet? It's just, do we have a space? Lauren, you mentioned like a empty lot, it's like literally that's it. Like, do we have a space that we feel is underutilized or that could really make an additional benefit to our community? And that could be a parking lot, that could be a parking space, that could be a park that exists already but isn't really that used or is underused. It's the space itself. And then you as the person who, maybe there's almost always like one person who's sort of the champion of it, right? You might have an idea of what that is supposed to be or could be. But if you asked 10 people, you'd get 10 different answers. If you asked 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, you'd get all those many answers too. So the next step then, I think, is a really open process of getting ideas from folks of, what do you want to do in this space? What would you do in this space? And at first, I think people are a little timid about that. I think they feel like they don't know. I don't know. You tell me. And like, or it's just a very traditional response. But you give them some ideas and tell them like, the money is no object. Just like, go nuts. Let's think about it. And out of that, you will probably kind of land on a 3, 4, 5 kind of either uses or additional amenities that people are looking for. And then it's about experimentation, and just like, even if all you do is you plan like a festival day, like one day where you just decide we're going to change the space for a day, that will start to get people thinking. So if you don't have all the funding in the world to like make a capital improvement or even a kind of low investment but big investment in your community improvement that'll last for a while, even if it's just something for the day, chalking one lane for the day and just programming it and showing people that there is another option, that something else could be here and that it could be really positive. I think that's the start, right? And that's what's gonna get you down there, get you down the line.
Perfect. So Kelly, we're gonna transition to the lightning round in just a minute, and just hopefully ask you some nonsensical questions and give Dawn another chance to drop a great big 10. But in the meantime, real quick, in about a minute, what's next for PPS?
Yes, I mentioned our community placemaking grants, which launched in 2021. We just finished up, I think it was our 3rd round of applications. So we'll be announcing those communities very shortly. We are very excited because we are going to be hosting our first fully in-person conference since the pandemic in Toronto in June of this year. And it is our 11th International Public Markets Conference. So this is definitely my baby. This will be my 5th markets conference that I've worked on. But we're hosting that in conjunction with the City of Toronto, with St. Lawrence Market and Market City TO. And that's through our Market Cities program. So that's another big thing that we're doing here. We've kind of transitioned our public markets program into this new program called Market Cities, which is really thinking about how markets have massive community impacts, but they need to be working systematically. So that's going to be a big effort for us. And yeah, those are, we're continuing. We started virtual training last year because we used to do it in our offices in New York and then we couldn't. So we're going to continue on with that. We're looking forward to more online trainings for folks that, in their own communities want to make these kinds of differences. And that's what's on the docket for 2023. And we're really excited about it.
And we'll have some links to those on the website for
Great.
folks once we get this posted and all of that. So yeah, we're going to go into the lightning round. This is a fun peppering of things. So I'll kick it off. Mets, Yankees, or bring the Dodgers back to Flatbush?
Oh, Dodgers. Bring the Dodgers back to Flatbush. But I am a Red Sox fan, so I'm a bit of a traitor to New York there.
I always use it as a trivia. The Dodgers are the only pro sports team named after pedestrians, which I find is a great little sync between
I didn't know that.
They're originally the trolley Dodgers because of the pedestrians having to dodge the trolleys getting around Brooklyn back in the day. So
they don't have to do that in LA.
Yeah, that's true. They're dodging lots of other things.
Yeah.
Kelly, you've mentioned farmers market. You're a big fan.
Yep.
You have a basket and you have your top 3 favorite ingredients. What are they? Your favorite produce or whatever it is?
All right. Cheese, because you can get some of the best cheese ever in a farmer's market. Tomatoes in season, and I got to go with corn on the cob.
Okay, Chris kind of stole my question, but I was wondering, you started in farming. If you were a farmer, what would you farm?
Vegetables.
Okay.
Animals are too much work.
Yeah, they are. They're a lot of work. I have chicken.
You will
like
never.
Chicken.
Yeah, you will never go on vacation if you have an animal, but vegetables, you can get your winters back at least that way.
Nice.
Which chain is better at placemaking? Walmart, Costco, or Dollar General?
Oh God.
Don't answer, Kelly. Don't feel like you have to answer.
Neither.
See, I think it's an easy one. I just saw an article this week of a urban Costco with apartments and stuff on top of it and everything else, and going, yes, we there are examples out there. We can make these things work in an urban environment.
It's funny because we just heard about this project that Harley Davidson's working on at their headquarters in Minneapolis? Is it, or Milwaukee? Milwaukee. Okay. And they're taking some of their parking away from one of their like major giant parking lots, and they're going to program and turn it into essentially like a park. And so all I would say is like the gauntlet's been thrown by Harley Davidson to these others. Like they have a lot of property and a lot of open space, and I bet it does not all have to be for parking. So
I think you mentioned you did public relations at one point in time, and
little bit, yeah.
Do you have a favorite White House press secretary, and who might that be?
Oh, what was it? CJ from the West Wing?
There's a good answer. Good answer. Next concert?
Oh, I'm going to see Bruce Springsteen in April.
Oh, well, geez.
Yep.
I mean,
it'll be my third Bruce concert. And while he seems to be unstoppable, I feel like we're reaching a point where anytime there's a chance to see Bruce in the E Street Band, I probably should take it, because you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kelly, it's not placemaking, but if you had to throw some colored tables and chairs out there, what color would they be?
Oh, good question. I would probably do like a blue, like an aqua.
Okay. Yeah.
And I like orange. I've always been a fan of orange. Maybe just those two. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe just that.
Yeah, I'm feeling the bright vibe.
Yeah, bright. Oh, we always go bright. It's always, borderline kindergarten classroom kind of style.
Well, you got to counter the subdivisions with the houses that come in 4 distinct colors of beige: taupe, brown, khaki, taupe.
No beige.
Wait, there's greige now. We have greige. Okay.
Oh yeah, greige.
Oh man,
greige. It matches our cubicles in most of our planning offices, so they go well together, right?
Perfect. Cool. Well, Kelly, thank you very much. We're going to call that an episode. We appreciate your time and certainly the efforts of PPS. 45 years and going strong. And now you have some new wind in your sails with just all the result of the pandemic, I think, and probably people craving the very things that you do. And what I liked about some of the things you mentioned too early on is it sounds to me like much of the private sector has probably caught on to the things that you all have done and are saying, well, yeah, well, we'll try that. Maybe not so well, but they've been trying, right? And giving communities a little bit of experience. But thank you for your time. Appreciate you being on with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was really fun. It was fun to do a lightning round. I've only heard those on other podcasts. I've never gotten to actually do one before.
There you go. Well, we're glad that you had a good time. Appreciate it. And as mentioned, we'll certainly put up all the links to PPS and the things that you were doing. And again, appreciate your time. So with that, our audience, thank you for tuning in. Remember to hit up our website, www.theplanningscommissionpodcast.com, and all of our social media outlets. Of course, I'm stunned at how many we have. At Planning Commish for Twitter, Planning Commission Podcast at Gmail. If you want to hit us up with the email, we actually got one this other day that, believe it or not, has led to the creation of an upcoming episode that I can't wait. The idea from a listener is turning into something real. So we do listen and pay attention, and again, appreciate it. Well, thank you all. Appreciate what you're doing, what we're doing. We're going to keep on trying, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Commissioner Danley here. Would you like to see more, hear more? Well, we got you covered. Go to our website, www.theplanningscommissionpodcast.com. It's got everything you want. Guests, yep, past episodes, the video, the audio, even our whiskey pairing, links to everything about all the people we've had on, books, websites, you name it. It's unbelievable. You want to reach out to us? Please. We'd be more than happy to chat. You can email us, planningcommissionpodcast@gmail.com. You want to tweet at us? Go for it, @planningcommish. We're also on YouTube with the Planning Commission Podcast channel, Facebook. Heck, send us a carrier pigeon if you need to. We'd love to hear from you about ideas, guests, you name it. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We'll keep doing our thing. You keep doing yours. Have a good one.